Hey guys, so what do you think piano history has to do with the recording industry today? So today I think will maybe be a bit more of a video essay than usual. So in the first half of this video, I want to talk a bit about what I consider to be some interesting piano history. Then in the second half of this video, I'm going to talk a bit about how, in my personal opinion, this is actually a really good example of patterns in economic history and how that applies to the audio industry today. So this video might be a little different from my usual style of video, whatever that is. So I'd love to know here in the comments what you think of this one. Thanks. Okay, so let's get started. So back in the old days, people didn't have Netflix or Hulu or even TV or radio of any kind. So what did they do for entertainment at night? Well, it is true that for a lot of history, many people were super overworked and they didn't have much time for entertainment at all, which is really sad. But some people did. So one of the popular things to do was to gather around a piano. So a lot of households, when they accumulated a bit of extra money, would then invest in a piano. And this was great for the piano industry. So they made tons of pianos, people were entertained, and everyone was happy. Then one day, the radio was invented, and it eventually started hitting the mass market. And people started producing all sorts of things for the radio stations. So musical recordings, radio plays, all sorts of audio entertainment. It was much more versatile than the piano, since you weren't limited to what your Aunt Sharon or Sister Susan could perform on a single piano. You could turn on a radio after a hard day of work and be entertained by a wide variety of entertainment and news. Besides that, when they finally started hitting the mass market, radios were cheaper to buy, and you didn't have to spend years of practice to learn how to use them. So naturally, many households started to have radios in them instead of pianos, and new sales of radios skyrocketed, whereas sales of pianos plummeted. When faced with the choice, many new households that had managed to save a bit of money for some entertainment for their living room now logically chose a radio instead of a piano. So, naturally, many people in the piano industry became upset. The industry was really hurting, so it's understandable. In 1909, more than 364,500 pianos were sold. But according to a 2015 article, annual sales in 2015 were down to around 30,000 to 40,000 pianos. So all of this is very sad for the piano people, but it opened up a new industry with radio production, radio repair, and so on. People that switched to radio early on made a killing. Now that pianos no longer had what was, if you really think about it, a near monopoly over home entertainment, the piano industry suffered, and in a sense that bubble burst. Eventually people switched careers, prices evened out, and there is still a piano industry today, albeit a much smaller industry. Years later, the same thing happened with the invention of television, and the same sort of thing has happened with other technology throughout history. But why am I talking about this, and what does it mean for the audio and music industry today? Well, similarly, today we have new technology. It's not radio this time, but instead more affordable and mass-produced sound gear alongside internet distribution that's coming in. And it's been disrupting the industry for some time now. Just like how the entry of radios onto the market disrupted things for people involved in the piano industry, this affordable gear and acoustic treatment is disrupting the recording and distribution process. It's making it much easier for people to build up home studios and work on their own without a professional studio. And don't get me wrong, I am a big advocate for professional studios, and I think it is a problem that a lot of people are minimizing how much expertise is required to make a really good production. And so the market is being flooded with poorly produced sound. I think people need to understand and learn to value the expertise of professional audio engineers and studios, because right now it is being minimized by a lot of people. But for someone that writes their own music and would have trouble justifying spending money on a professional studio or with a professional engineer, the barrier to entry is now a lot lower and a lot more attainable for them. And that's good in a way. It democratizes the industry. With cheap gear and access to millions of people through the internet, people can upload their tracks and try it out. And if they're lucky and they truly have talent, they might get somewhere doing that. You no longer need the attention of some bigwig at a label anymore just to get started. And that's pretty cool for the average person. And besides, I think the industry will still survive because a lot of artists that are getting traction and starting to make money do eventually reach out to professionals to improve their product at some point. Anyway, in a sense, just like how the radio burst the bubble that was piano sales and production, these new technologies have burst the bubble that was audio production and record sales. If you think about the money and success that was flowing in during the album era from the 60s through the 90s as an anomaly, maybe even an economic bubble, basically as something that had grown bigger than its intrinsic value, then it's not so upsetting when you think about the state of the industry today. When you hear stories from labels and studios from during that era, it certainly does sound like people were exhibiting the typical behavior of those that hold overvalued assets during a bubble. People were splurging and wasting money left and right on extravagant travel expenses, wasting studio time, drugs, etc. If the stories are true, then it's very different from the behavior that I've seen in studios today. Basically, during bubbles, people often change their spending habits based on a change in perceived wealth. And this historical shift in behavior within the audio industry, in my opinion, is a pretty good example of that wealth effect. These new technologies that are democratizing the industry are causing growing pains, sure, but it's not like it hasn't happened before. And besides, maybe we can view these technologies as antitrust agents in a sense, providing a more convenient and affordable alternative for the market and breaking things up a bit. So maybe instead of complaining about these things existing, we should adapt to the new situation and reform how things are done so that it can not only be affordable for the consumer, but also for us, the producers. I think that's the real problem. But a lot of the big studios and people in the old industry structure are suffering because of this economic shift. They're like the piano producers that are scratching their heads wondering why their old system isn't working anymore. And some are growing bitter and blaming the technology and the people that are working in this new system and trying to screw over the little guys so that they themselves can stay afloat. But throughout economic history, new technologies like this have been introduced, and this same type of pattern of human and market behavior has emerged. It's not just piano. If we decided these new technologies were bad because they were disrupting industries and avoided them as a result, then we'd still be in the dark ages in terms of tech. And with each of these new technologies, a generation or two later, no one was complaining about how horrible or bad the thing was because people adapt to it and move on to whatever the next thing is. So, with that thought in mind, and with an intent to be optimistic, positive, and constructive instead of pessimistic and negative, what's our new radio here? With the decline of big studios and labels happening because of the internet and cheaper gear and equipment, and an overflow of audio engineers being pumped out by studios and certificate schools trying to stay afloat and make a few bucks off people interested in the industry, what's our radio? Sure, I think some of the big studios, like those in LA or New York or Nashville, will stick around and continue to be successful. I am not saying that this is a doomsday situation for our industry. But what's the new and exciting thing that some of us could shift towards? How do we stick around in this industry that we're passionate about while also taking advantage of economic shifts to maximize our success? If we don't even think about these things, then we as individuals cannot make an informed decision about whether to shift or keep doing what we are doing. So those are just some of my thoughts. I'd love to know your answers to that one in the comments below. And also, I know my thoughts here are fairly open-ended in a way, and I hope it came across that I am not entirely on one side of this idea. Like, yeah, I'm pretty in favor of new technologies, but I also feel for those that struggle when a new tech is introduced. And I understand that for the individual, it can be very detrimental. And even though I think new tech might be good for the group in the end, I still acknowledge that we have some real problems to tackle, problems that arise from these growing pains. So yeah, I hope this video wasn't too philosophical for you guys, and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And as usual, if you like this video, please tell your friends about my channel, watch my other videos, or check out my Patreon. I'll be coming out with new videos every Wednesday, and thanks for watching. Okay. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I am done. It's been too long.